Okay, good morning colleagues, and thank you for your attendance at the first Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny panel of 2026. Once again, we are joined by a myriad of knowledgeable officers and guests from external organisations, but today I'm particularly pleased that we are joined by Matthew, who's sitting over here in the front row, who's a young person who's an expert by experience and will be making a contribution to agenda item 5 when we get to that on the agenda. So I'm sure that, as always, we will have some interesting and informed conversations. Can I ask that before making a contribution, you state your name and your job role and organisation when responding to questions? I think we're okay with, I'll ask the councillors to speak, so you'll know their names. And good morning to those people joining us online. You are most welcome. As always, it's a privilege to be in the chair for this meeting, and I shall endeavour to take us through the important business in a calm and equitable manner, encouraging participation. As we move through the agenda, I shall briefly introduce each item, then call on the relevant person to present the paper. I'll then go to other professionals in the room so that we can hear their perspective, and also we're joined by both we're joined by Councillor Justin Bowen at the moment, Cabinet Member, and we are expecting Councillor Stephen Foster, so I shall invite them to make comment as well. Then on the first item, Matthew will make a contribution, I hope, and we also have guests here from Health Watch, Debbie at the back, and Hazel from the Parent Carer Forum, and so they will be making contributions, both of them, I believe, on agenda item 5. Yeah, okay, brilliant. So when we've heard from all of those people, I'll open up the floor to take questions, hopefully in the order that I see hands raised. But obviously this is an organic meeting, so, you know, let's see what happens. But if possible, responses will be given today, but we should also acknowledge that on occasion, where a written response is required, if there's a lot of detail, etc., it will be provided after the meeting. Please try to remember to switch on your microphone before speaking and off when you have finished. And just a reminder, the meeting is being live streamed. Hopefully you're all used to me saying that by now, and I hope that that approach works for you all. So let's move on with the agenda, as we've again got a couple of meaty items to get through in particular. Okay, so agenda item 1. Sam, do we have apologies or substitutes?
We have apologies from our church representative, Tim Reed, and we don't have any substitutes.
That's great, thank you. Item 2, are there any, does anyone have any declaration of interest or matters to raise in relation to the party whip? Looking to my left, no? No? Okay, that's great. Public participation, we have none this morning. So confirmation, agenda item 4, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Welcome, Councillor Foster. No problem. I understand there's a lot of traffic on the roads this morning, a typical Monday morning. So confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Thank you to officers for producing and circulating the minutes. A point of accuracy has been raised in relation to page 7, minute number 701, performance and 25-26 in-year budget monitoring. So we will be making an amendment to the minutes here to replace what is there, which says an increase in rates of CME should be seen as positive, as it indicated that children were being identified. We're going to replace that with, whilst any increase in CME is of concern, it should be noted that this is in part due to improved reporting and identification from the public and agencies, which is positive. So a little bit of meat around the bones on that. So hopefully that's all right with you. Does anyone else have any other points of accuracy to raise in relation to the minutes? No? Okay, so subject to that amendment that I've just gone through, I shall sign them as an accurate record of the last meeting. Great. So moving on to agenda item 5, which is a regular item for us, progress against the SEND Local Area Partnership Priority Action and Improvement Plan. So in attendance for this item on the agenda, we have Councillor Stephen Foster. Good timing there, Councillor Foster. We do have Councillor Bowen here, but doesn't often speak on this item, I don't think, although may wish to chip in. We have Adam Johnston, Director of Children's Services, Daniela Carson, yeah, I see Daniela just there, Assistant Director of All Age Disability 0 to 25, Sarah Wilkins, Assistant Director of Education, Early Years Inclusion and Education Place Planning, You've all got such snappy titles. I don't know how you fit them onto a badge. Jade Brooks, from Director of Operations, NHS Herefordshire and Worcestershire Integrated Care Boards. Sonia Upton, again, Herefordshire and Worcestershire Health and Care Trust. And have we got Scott? No Scott, so Sonia, okay. And then, as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, we have Matthew Palmer here to make a contribution, which I'm really, really pleased about. And also co-production officer Amy Knight, who'll be supporting Matthew if he needs it, although I've had a conversation with Matthew and I think he knows what he's going to be saying. As chair of this committee, I'm firm on my commitment to hearing the voice of young people and that this council acts on what these young people say. So I'm particularly pleased that we're joined by Matthew today. Welcome. In addition, as I've mentioned, we've got Hazel and Debbie here today. Okay, so for clarification, in this meeting, we're being asked to consider the update on progress against the Send Local Area Partnership Priority Action Plan and Improvement Plan, determine whether we wish to carry out any further scrutiny, and agree whether we would wish to make any comments to the Cabinet member with responsibility for education and Send. So we've been, in the agenda pack, been provided with the latest update on progress made against the plan, and thank you to all involved pulling it together. As I said, it is a standing item on our agenda following the inspection in April 2024, which resulted in the Level 3 outcome. And we do have regular and frank discussions about the action plan at our meetings. So I wonder if I could ask those presenting to try and keep your update today to 5 minutes, if possible. You might have rehearsed and it takes a little longer than that, but if you could keep it brief to the most recent updates and progress made, that would be much appreciated. So I think we're going to start by hearing from Adam. Yes? Thank you, Adam.
Well, you're going to hear from me to say good morning. Aside from that, I'm going to hand over to Daniela, who authored a significant amount of the report. Needless to say, I'll chip in thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Daniela. Over to you.
So, as you've said, we continue to update on our progress against the Priority Action Plan and Improvement Plan. And I will hand over to colleagues to talk about various elements of the priority actions and the improvement plan areas. Of significance since we were last here is that on the 7th of January we had a deep dive. So our NHSE and DFE colleagues came and spoke to us, and we presented the progress being made around Priority Action Area 2. And Matthew will talk about, I'm sure, some of the evidence we put forward there and the roles of Voices United in that progress. I'll hand over initially to my health colleagues to update on Priority Action Area 1, which is in respect of waiting times and the progress being made in all areas for that. Who wants?
That's great, thank you. I do know there's a lot to get through here, but if you could try and keep it to 5 minutes, that'd be great.
Yeah, not a problem, thank you. With regard to the report from an NHS perspective, you'll see that it reflects very much last time's report, actually, in terms of, at this point in the year, we're continuing the action plan as set out for the year. Waiting times, in a nutshell, continues to be an incredibly difficult thing to manage. The number of demand coming in is a lot higher than the capacity that we have, including the capacity that we've secured from buying more of this type of thing. Excuse me. You'll also see in the paper, so paragraph 10 describes that complexity, but then we go on to lay out our three-pillar or three-work stream approach. So not only are we trying to get that demand and capacity right, but we're starting to do that transformational change, which then should help us support a more sustainable services. But it's not all going in the wrong direction in terms of weights. You'll see there for therapies, that is now getting to a much better position. And actually by the end of March, we hope to have no child waiting over 18 weeks for some of those areas, and indeed none over 52 weeks. And that's a huge improvement since the point of the inspection. When I say the waiting times for the other areas haven't moved, that's because they're subject to a 3-year plan. At this point in time, I'm working alongside our colleagues in the SEND partnership and with the Health and Care Trust to draw up a 3-year plan for neurodiversity. That is nearly ready, so the timing of this meeting is slightly out, otherwise we'd be bringing it today. But it will be definitely with you for scrutiny in the next meeting. And then we're going to do the same with regard to community paediatrics. Community paediatrics does present us then an opportunity to co-produce that with our partners and look at the key pathways that are impacting children and young people. The report tells you a lot about the transfers out, and I'll be happy to take any questions with regard to those areas. And then it finally talks about the prototype work that's going on in Forest District. This is a really exciting pilot that gives you the idea of the type of transformation work we're all committed to delivering with schools to make sure our education provision is accessible for children with neurodivergent conditions.
I think you were well within the 5 minutes there. That's amazing. Thank you. So is that the main updates from the County Council and Health? Is it a good time to bring Matthew in to share his experiences now? Yeah, okay. Matthew, is that okay? Do you want to help with your mic? The button on the right, I think.
I think that's all good.
Welcome again.
So I'm here as a representative of Voices United, which was set up as a forum in July last year in order to help bring together and increase the visibility of the voice of children and young people across Worcestershire. We have currently got 13 active members with a range of neurodiversities and physical disabilities, including autism, ADHD, blindness, Ehlers-Danlos, verbal dyspraxia, just to name a few. Over last few years, working on various projects over the last few months, including, for example, contributing at the Genuine Partnerships Training Day, which we helped develop the co-production pledge, amongst other things, which was really good discussion. And then linking into that, which is the reason why we're here and what we are presenting today, is over the past few months, we both us as a group and as well as wider work carried out by Amy and Shanika, with both going into various settings, various schools, various alternative provisions settings. We have helped develop the children and young people's desired outcomes, which you will see in your notes. And that has been done with the help of 450 children and young people over the past 7 months, as stated. And I think the reason why we've come on to why as a collective we settled on this is because I think they really embody the fundamentals of how to make children safe, whether they're neurodivergent, whether they're disabled or not. It's how do you make them feel safe, how do you make them feel secure, and how do you make, because without that, they're not going to be able to access any of the curriculum. They're not going to be able to access joy, aspiration, desires, dreams for the future kind of thing. So, and I think, so obviously, number 2, the I feel safe and sorted, I think that's the very core, that's effectively the bottom tier of, I don't know if you're aware of Maslow's sort of hierarchy of need kind of thing, and the rest of them sort of build on that kind of thing. Because if you're not part of a community kind of thing, then you're not going to be able to build those social interactions. If you're not listened to, then you're not going to feel self-worth kind of thing. You're not going to have that ability to have the choice over your life kind of thing, over the direction kind of thing. If you're not able to be happy and healthy in your mind and body, you're not going to be able to concentrate on anything else kind of thing, because you're going to be having to focus on medical needs, mental needs kind of thing. And with all of those together kind of thing, you're not going to be able to live a happy, healthy, fulfilled life kind of thing. And I think that's the fundamental basis that we've come here. And I think the hopes for the future that we've got is that when these outcomes get circulated, we've got a launch event at the Wyeth Forest School in Kidderminster on Wednesday, where we're going to be officially launching it, presenting to the children there, kind of thing. And I think that the overall aim in the future is that these outcomes get really embedded within the heart of the local partnership at all levels kind of thing. Because, and hopefully across all children effectively, regardless of whether they're disabled or neurodivergent or not, because they're effectively the fundamental basis of human decency and well-being for children and the grounding that sets them up for life kind of thing. But what's become clear, obviously, over the past years is that these needs have been especially neglected when it comes to neurodiversity and physical disabilities. And hopefully, because we have also worked along with the Outcomes Pledge, we've also worked with the Parent Carer Forum over the past few months on creating an impact tool which will hopefully be able to be rolled out. I believe it is in pilot stage at the moment, or about to be rolled into pilot stage. Hopefully that will provide a concrete grounding to that various different parts of the partnership will be able to measure and provide concrete evidence of them moving towards the outcomes being achieved in general, kind of thing. And as well as that, just to come back to Voices United, we've got various different plans for the future, which we'll hopefully be able to embed that as well. Various in terms of raising awareness kind of thing. We've got ideas for art exhibition, potentially getting involved with sports, but also as well getting more down on the ground kind of thing, that we have got plans to get into schools, do assemblies and whatnot, help raise awareness of neurodiversity and disabilities and help, and so both so people understand how to deal with it kind of thing, if you're not, how to support people, just generally awareness kind of thing, trying to remove that stigma around it. And also as well, really working with staff kind of thing, both as TAs and teachers, to work out what they are struggling with when it comes to having a disabled person, neurodivergent person come into their classroom. What, if they have it, strikes fear in them, so that we can work and try and develop training to help provide a toolkit of basic ideas of how they can deal with these situations, because not everything's going to work with every child, but if they at least have a basic idea with that, then it's going to help them at least start forming a relationship, which is the most important thing with a child and a member of staff, and that's what really builds being able to make progress kind of thing for children, rather than any intervention and things like that. And then leading on to that as well, there was mentioned and potentially brought up, and I know the Parent Carer Forum have got ideas about this as well, so there's potential we might work together on it, is working with the University of Worcester to really integrate that kind of training within their PGCE and their teaching undergrads. But those are not even really at discussion phase. That's sort of general idea that will need to be brought forward over the coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Wow, no, thank you. That was such a confident and comprehensive contribution. I don't know if you've spoken in public at meetings before, Matthew, but thank you from all of us. It's such a worthwhile thing having you here today. I know that you had prepared a few slides and for us to sort of see during the meeting, but unfortunately we couldn't share them during the meeting. I'll ensure that they are circulated with the minutes of the meeting, though. On behalf of the committee, we'd love you to come back and speak to us again about some of the new initiatives that I think you've just raised, because, as I said, it's a real commitment from me, and I'm sure the rest of the committee would agree that we need to hear the voices of young people with lived experience who are so-called experts by experience, if you like. So thank you. That was marvellous. Amy, do you have anything that you want to add, or are you happy to leave it with Matthew?
I think Matthew's covered it.
Okay, I see an indication from Adam.
No, nothing to add to what Matthew said, because it was so comprehensive, but just to bring some of that to life with a tangible example. So on a regular basis, the partnership will gather for the SEND Partnership Committee, and a key element of those meetings is to obviously review progress against the improvement actions, against the priority actions. On the back of what Matthew said in terms of children's outcomes now being defined and being so clear, the expectation going forward will not just be the leads for those various improvements and priority actions talk to the evidence base for that. They now need to be adding in, and how is that meeting children's outcomes? Because if they're not meeting children's outcomes, what's the point of having the outcomes in the first place? place. And the beauty of that is, you know, we'll have Amy, we'll have Shanika, we'll have Matthew, one of Matthew's colleagues, Lydia, who will be physically present as well to hold folks to account. So it's the translation of something that's absolutely fantastic and identified by young people themselves, but then turning that into actual tangible actions to measure against.
Of course, yeah. Thank you for articulating that. So before I move to the panel for questions, Councillor Foster, Stephen, is there anything that you would like to contribute at this point?
Can I contribute later, please?
Oh, I think so.
Thank you.
I think I can be
Thank you,
flexible.
Madam Chair.
Councillor Berrien, anything from you at this point?
No, just to echo your thanks for a really well-made presentation, and we need more to hear more, I think, is the bottom line.
Absolutely agree. Thank you. Okay. I turned my own microphone off. Over to the panel for your questions. I think we're starting with Matt. Okay, do you want to, if possible, reference the page that you're on and the paragraph or the table that your question is focused on? Thank you.
Will do. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, especially. Thank you, Matthew. It's Table 1, which is paragraph 11, and obviously in colour there's lots of red, which obviously doesn't look good. So page 3 in the paper copy, yeah. So, I mean, you've touched on the main cause is increased in demand, but I think we were probably expecting a lot better figures. So it's maybe just trying to find out why it is so poor that these are increasing in those areas of paediatrics, ADHD and autism, and when do we actually, we've got a 3-year plan, and I suppose the point is we don't want to wait for 3 years to see the improvement. When do you think we'll actually start seeing that improvement coming through? Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that question, Matt. Who would like to answer? Thanks, Jade.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarity, we're not going to wait for the 3-year plan, do the plan and then see the numbers go down. That's not the intent. Apologies if I made it sound like that. These numbers are going to go up and up every month because the number of children that are joining the list goes up every month. And the reason for that is the capacity that we have in the NHS. We've done that through the demand and capacity analysis, shows that we're somewhere between 10% of the actual demand. So that means 90% we haven't got a service for. So it is as harsh and as difficult as that. So my job, alongside my colleague here, is to look at things like productivity. Can we introduce digital to help make this work more effectively? Can we introduce more staff? And can we look at actually the value of a diagnosis, and therefore open up our services to children where diagnosis isn't the criteria? That way we feel we should, as a partnership, put more emphasis, sorry, my voice is going today, more emphasis on getting the support in, getting it early regardless of a diagnosis. That doesn't let the NHS off the hook about making sure it has the right level of capacity for diagnosis, but we feel we can get to that position. Next time I come back, I hope to tell you about our plans for the next 3 years. Now, we have looked at this in the last year in terms of what can we do rapidly. So you'll read in the paper about the transfers of the 900. But it's very clear when you've got a capacity that only meets about 10%, and those 10% have to be the ones where it's clinically urgent or the very long waiters. There's a whole group of children, young people, that are not getting the right level of service. The other way we could look at this is to move more children into other providers. Again, we've spent a lot of time looking at the quality of those other providers. And we are committed to transferring children into providers where they are actually going to get seen and not into another maybe hidden waiting list, or where the quality is such that our local services, so our SENCOs, our educational psychologists, our CAMS workers, turn around and say that diagnosis really was terrible and we're going to have to repeat it. So that's the sort of context in which we're working in. I'm hoping in the 3-year plan we'll be able to do this at much greater speed than we've piloted this year. So whereas we've gone from 900 children this year, I think in the next year we're going to really push that number up. And that will be not only in the transfers, but the productivity and new staff and new ways of working with the NHS.
Thank you, Jade. Matt, you might have a supplementary, I'm not sure, but you did mention the 900, and I know Richard had a question around that. Is it okay if we jump to that question from Richard about the 900 young people? Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I was wondering, how were these 900 people or individuals identified? And two, it says we've got 5 independent providers. How are we measuring their performance? Are we having feedback from parents and carers?
Thank you, Richard. I have jumped ahead a little bit, but as you mentioned both of those things, I thought it was a good time to bring the question in.
Yes, certainly. So the 900 children, our priority as a SEND partnership was to look at the children that have been waiting the longest. So we looked at the numbers, looked at the resource that was possible and said, let's go for it. Let's aim to try and get 900. And I'm hoping by March I'll come back and tell you it wasn't 900. We managed to do 1,000. What we did is the ICB has those contracts with the 5 providers, and we did a little, what we call a mini competition between the 5 to say, actually, we would be interested in working with you, all 5, to do what we usually do, but could you upscale your service so we could transfer a large number? And that led to 2 providers in particular saying, actually, we can manage that number and we can do it within 12 months. So we've worked with those 2 providers. We have fortnightly monitoring with the 2, and then we have monthly with the other 3. So we have a different scale of overview depending on the significance of the work. And because this transfer, as I said just a minute ago, if we get this right and we can go further faster next year, that's why we've gone with the really intensive monitoring. Now, it says in the report 900 children have been identified. Actually, some of those 900 children have had their assessment completed and been seen. So the monitoring that we've got every fortnight now is starting to track at the individual child level. We're starting to get early feedback from families that said, actually, when we got into the assessment was fabulous. But by the way, NHS, why couldn't we have had this a couple of years ago? Which is a fair enough perspective, and one that actually the NHS is embarrassed to be in this position. So we'll keep up with that engagement. We are thinking if we broaden up the numbers, actually we will use probably all of these 5 going forward. You know, we're very fortunate in this area, and it's not the same in other areas. Only last week I received a notification from another neurodivergence provider elsewhere in the UK that had gone bankrupt and had just stopped services. We have no idea if a Worcestershire family has approached that provider, because you can do under right to choose. You can pick any provider in the UK. So we are now diligently trying to go through the records to find any family that have been adversely impacted. That's why it's really critical we get really strong relationships with the 5 that we've got.
Thanks, Jade. We always appreciate your honesty. And Richard, I'm sure that's probably answered your questions, yeah? So, Matt, just to come back to you, did you have a follow-up on your original question? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, thanks for the detail. I suppose I understand it's not going to take 3 years, but I suppose what I'd like to see is when do you think we'd see some slightly better figures over this coming year? Because obviously I understand demand's going up, but it's at some point we'd like to hope it starts to level off in terms of that. So a bit more detail there, thank you.
Thanks, Jade.
Yes, certainly. Sorry, I forgot about that bit. Actually, we will see some change by March because this group of 900 are not in our numbers yet. So when they've been assessed, they've had that episode's been completed, they will come off. Also, Sonia can tell you a bit more about the validation work that the Health and Care Trust is doing, and actually their rate of productivity, because they've realigned their workforce now to really sort of ramp up the amount of assessments and support, actually, as well as the triage work. So we're always making sure we've got good clinical assurance about what order of children we're seeing. So I would say March, I should be able to, you'll see it in the figures in terms of that step change.
That's great. Thank you, Jade. I know that Dan's got a follow-up on that, and we also do have some questions around staffing and some of the staff changes that have been made. So perhaps we come back to you then. Sonia, is that okay? Dan, do you want to ask your follow-up? Thanks.
Apologies, this has developed in my mind over the last 2 minutes as we've got more information. So we're currently looking at a situation where we've got round about 10% of the capacity we need. We've got a 3-year plan that we're kind of in the process of producing. And obviously this is the second meeting in a row where we've been discussing this. So I'm trying to, in my head, see the trajectory we're heading. Obviously, we've got demand versus existing and new capacity, and there's an expectation that we need to build that capacity. And obviously there is capacity modelling that will be going on at this point. So in my head, what I'm trying to imagine is we're at 10%, and I'm assuming at the end of that 3-year plan, you have a percentage that you want to be at. I'd hope it's 100, but obviously we've got to be very realistic about this one. So when that 3-year plan ends up in front of us, will that clearly be showing us this is where we expect to be at each point, and this is where we expect to see this happen? Also, you've made a very valid point about the capacity and the fact that it does seem to be increasing, and it's great to see that modelling is there. Will it have contingencies within it? Because let's face it, 5 years ago there was not necessarily the expectation, and that's made that worse. So where will those contingencies be built in to enable us to feel secure this will work?
Well done for forming that question in the last couple of minutes. But Jade, would you like to respond, please?
Yeah, I have spent many an hour with Sonia and her team and our informatics teams and every expert I can find to look at waiting list. And this is a difficult, tricky area. And I say that as somebody that's responsible for the elective waits in hospitals. That's easy. I can put more activity on and those weights go down. This is different. And the reason it's different is that you've got the complexity of demand that fluctuates, but is still on the up. And I think last time I came here, I talked about the work we'd done across with public health consultants to look at that demand to say at what point is it going to level off. So unfortunately, it's not leveling off at the moment. It's still on the up. And I think that tells us something about expectations of our schools, our colleges, our alternative provision, but also families and their desperation actually to get the diagnosis because it does unlock doors. So that's where we are as a society. So you're right, in the demand and capacity modelling, have to allow for not the demand that historically 12 months tells me or last year. I have to then model up an increase year on year. So if you imagine it's going in like that as a demand, then I take out the capacity we've got, then I take out the capacity that we will have as people come into post and these changes occur. But then there's something about also modelling in as we go through and we talk to families. We are also finding families that have already had their assessment elsewhere privately, either on the NHS or unfortunately have paid for it themselves. We now need to keep talking to those families to make sure, A, they got a good quality assessment, and then B, allow for a rate of return back to the NHS to redo that assessment, as awful as that sounds. And then also allow for, particularly in ADHD, for families that may say that the needs of their child or young person requires medication. So there are all moving parts in all of this. On top of that, if we have a service that just does diagnosis, we are missing the point. So in our modelling, we've designed ways of advice and guidance. We've talked about link workers to schools. We are talking about how we can work as a multidisciplinary team around the needs of the siblings, the parents. It's not just the child and their diagnostics. So all that comes into the model. When I come back again, what I will bring you is a waterfall diagram that shows year on year, this is where we start, and these are the changes that we'd expect to see year in year, and this is how we're going to meet that demand. So you'll see that across the 3 years, and from the waterfall diagram, you'll be able to see what intervention is impacting on what number. And I suppose that's the best way I can describe it for now.
No, thank you for that. I like Dan, I think I'm quite a visual person, so I use the word roadmap quite a lot, but actually understand it's probably more like a game of snakes and ladders, where you're kind of making progress and then, oops, we go back a little bit. But I think what you've described as a waterfall sounds like it might be a really helpful thing. Dan, do you want to come back on it?
So just for clarity, 3-year plan should get us to the 100%. That's the aim. Excellent.
Fabulous, thank you. Sam, is your point along the same lines as this or on something else? Because I've got a list at the moment, but...
It's along the increase in numbers. Is that all right? Yeah, okay. But first, I want to thank Matthew for his very articulate presentation. Thank you. In terms, I just remember yesterday looking at the numbers and thinking, wow, I mean, we've had a doubling in 4 or 5 years, and you're saying it's not even levelling off at all. So demand is on the increase, So with the EHCP, do we think that there is an issue insofar as, for example, schooling isn't able to cope with the demands of the children, so they're going through that route in order to try and unlock, like you said, resources, etc.? Or is there something else? I mean, are we coming out of the COVID era, or is this still impacting the numbers? Are we going to see some light at the end of the tunnel where COVID generation is finished? And so I'm just really, really concerned about the numbers, and I'd like just for you to shed some light on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer the element about are we coming out of COVID, then I may have to ask Sarah or Daniela with regard to education, health and care plans. We are seeing the age profile of children coming and young people coming forward for assessment being across all ages still. So that does support the hypothesis that actually there are still families that have waited and waited and feel now is the right time to come forward. And I think in the COVID pandemic, there was that these services weren't fully open. So they were part of the NHS recovery post the pandemic, but now we've got families that feel that they think things like the waiting list, what's the point? Whereas with initiatives like this has now generated more confidence about coming forward. So we've done things like talk to our GPs so they are fully aware that there are providers out there. And people should not shy away from coming forward to get a diagnosis either as a parent or for a child or young person because of their waiting list. However, this remains a national issue. And that profile of demand is something that other systems are also experiencing.
Yeah, thank you, Jade. I know there were some elements of the question based around school. So Daniela or Sarah, would you like to pick up Sarah? Thank you.
I'll pick it up from the aspect of our children are our children first, and so we anticipate that they are able to access education in their home community. The question that you ask, I think Jade's initial response looks to the wider system, so there isn't a specific Worcestershire response to that. And if we look outside of Worcestershire in terms of changing policy, changing education policy, multiple aspects of research around how our education, the expectations of our education settings, and how the education system has been challenged to respond to children and families. I think Matthew's point at the beginning is a really, really important one. And has been a challenge to the education system. And I mean that from early years settings right through to post-16 settings is the basics of actually understanding a child, putting that child at the centre and listening. We will have schools that do that well and do it naturally. And you will have schools that are challenged by the system of education. The Department for Education has undertaken curriculum reviews. If we could spend another hour looking at the research and the policy review, and we are just about to enter a phase where the Department for Education will launch very soon the reforms to the SEND system, which have a really quite a significant focus around education. So there isn't one particular answer, but I would just, in response to, I think your query about is this schools, not being able to respond. Many of our schools have not responded early enough and in the right way, and that's why the work that we're doing now, particularly some of the initiatives around neuro-inclusion in schools, that is a national programme, parent care involved in. Just actually, Matthew's suggestion, which is so important, about our training for our teachers, looking at aspects there, looking at our training for schools, all of those things are kind of system changes that are happening, starting to happen now, but this is, it's slow, it takes a long time, to change a very, very big system.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, and thanks for mentioning the SEND white paper that obviously we're still waiting for and are expecting hopefully before the end of the month. But fingers crossed on that one. Okay, Sam, with that? Brilliant. Okay, so Hazel, you indicated that you wanted to come here.
Yeah, I was just going to pass comment and answer the question from a parent-carer perspective, if that was okay. So, I mean, I can use the blunt answer, which is my primary skill. The blunt answer is that the education system is not a great fit for neurodivergent young people, and it's squeezing them, and they eventually get squeezed out or up to the surface, and parents are forced to access a diagnosis, to access services. I think it was Jade that said, a diagnosis unlocks services and access, and it gives you the leverage that you need. So parents are forced into this position. I'd also add that, as part of the Partnership for Inclusion Neurodiversity project, PINS project in Worcestershire, we're visiting 30 different primary schools across Worcestershire, and it is a postcode lottery, and we've seen some excellent practice. Last week I went to Oasis Warned School, and their sense of provision is awesome. Couldn't find a parent to moan about anything. But then we go to other schools, and people are in tears and breaking down because it's not fit for their child, it's not the right support for the child. So even within Worcestershire, there's this massive lottery of education provision in a system that just is not supportive of neurodivergent young people. And the other thing I would add, as an autistic person myself, a diagnosis is one of our children's needs. To understand yourself and to be able to know why you are who you are is really critical. So, you can provide the best support in the long run, and we absolutely should do, diagnosis or otherwise, but actually knowing who you are is a really critical part of that. So personally, I think a diagnosis is one of those needs, and we shouldn't forget that.
No, thanks, Hazel, for coming in there. We do really value your experience and your input from this perspective, and I don't disagree with anything that you just said, actually. So I think I've jumped around in my own head a little bit here, but I think, Mel, I think you wanted to ask a question, or if not, I can jump to Dan, who had a second question, I think. Mel, go for it.
First of all, thank you. It's a very informative information you've just shared with us. Thank you. Thank you, Matt, as well. I have been actually working with United Voices itself as well, and we've had a meeting before at Wild Goose Rural Training Centre, which thank you so much. And I must say that it's very informative, and we have brought education into that particular centre itself, which is brilliant. So just moving the whole thing forward, I just want to see more engagement with this kind of stuff areas in schools, because obviously we've just had this discussion. And of course, how does the assessment process actually work? And how are the children actually put into the right category of where the assessments are going? And we've just heard, I'm still sort of taking that information in just to register that obviously that we need to make sure the assessment procedures is done properly through from the beginning, really. That's fundamental. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a point that Jade just picked up on about having that assessment done properly in the first way. Otherwise, excuse me, it's happening to me now as well. Otherwise, you know, that young person, it's not a good experience for that young person, the family foremost, but then it is also to be bounced around the system again is really not what we're looking to achieve at all. So thank you for that. Was there a question, Mel? I might have missed it. Or was it a comment or just, no?
It's just a comment at this moment.
That's
Thank
fine.
you.
Thank you. Dan, I think I'd got you on my list next then. Anthony and then Seb. Yeah, okay, so Dan.
So just a quick follow-up on this one. Obviously, we've mentioned the capacity side of things and obviously the value of a diagnosis. I completely understand what everyone is saying about kind of making sure people are trained to do all these things, especially teachers. I'm asking this question as a teacher who I consider to be relatively well trained in this. Also, I would say the education system is not designed for neurodivergent teachers either. But obviously we look at this kind of, we've got to get these people through the system over the next kind of couple of years or the next 3 years. We need to push that forward. Obviously, we need to make sure that there is the support there. But one of the things I'm trying it's really hard for me to square this circle is without the diagnosis, there's only so much you can do and you're not an expert. So with as much training in the world, you can't really come up with exactly what it is that is the need. You can do so much with that and you can be trained as much as you want to be trained. So how do we make sure over the next 3 years, as this is all moving forward, because obviously these are people, they could be people's GCSE years effectively, it could be when they're doing their kind of most important phases. How do we ensure that all of this still enables people to actually access what they need? Because I have heard on numerous occasions, oh yeah, but they don't, it's not on their EHCP or on their statement back in the old days, so we're not going to do that because we can't afford it. And that's where it goes, is that you hear schools, they won't say the words aloud, but they'll say it in a way about capacity, etc., etc. So I agree that, you know, obviously we need to build that capacity up, but how over the next 3 years do we make sure that young people are protected as we go through this? And I know that's a really difficult one to answer, but it's just I'm listening to all this and I'm still kind of, I know I'm pulling a face and I'm trying not to, but it's just my own personal knowledge of this is making me feel a little uncomfortable about this 3-year plan.
No, I think it's a valid point and valid question. Who would like to I don't all jump at once. Sonia, would you like to?
Shall I start?
Sure.
And then maybe some colleagues can come in. Because I think the fundamental way that we can do that is by all working together. You know, no one can do that by themselves. So it's not a challenge that health is going to solve on their own or that education is going to solve on their own. And that's the purpose of our SEND partnership, really. And it has to include the voice of young people and parent carers. It has to include everyone working together to look at how we address that need and how we become focused on needs with children in the middle of that and those individual children. There's not one global answer to that question, but how we focus on those individual children and how we make that difference. So yes, a diagnosis may be a need, but lots of needs can be met without diagnosis. And having a diagnosis doesn't mean your needs are met. So it has to be, how do we do that differently together? And how do we transform how we work? And I think that's what some of the national learning is showing as well. So how do we become much more focused on need? And yeah, so as a system, that's what our SEND partnership work is doing. We're introducing things like SEND specialist health visitors. So that will start from birth onwards. We're looking at how do we work as a system across schools and how we have health professionals within those schools in different ways. So I don't know if Daniela...
Can I just quickly come in, if that's okay? I mean, I agree, and I'm sure we'd all agree that partnership working is fundamental to success. And I've noticed that you've talked about data sharing as part of the report as well. So on page 9, paragraph 37, you mentioned Rio, which I think is a data sharing database. So in the spirit of collaboration and partnership, who has access to the data that is shared there? Is that external to the NHS or is that just within the NHS? Could you shed a bit of light on that for us? And then I can go to education colleagues for a more full answer on Dan's question. Sorry to jump in, Dan.
Yeah, so the Rio system is a health system that is about your patient record. So that is about where your patient where your personal health record is saved on the trust. We've moved from one system to another in the last year. And that has improved how we're going to be able to report on that data and what information we can pull from that system. So it's going to make huge improvements on how we learn about what children are getting which services. There are other systems though, and technology can be our friend as well as a barrier. But there's a system called Liquid Logic that the council owns and runs, which does connect all partners through the EHCP process.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. Do you want to come in now, Adam?
Yeah, sort of broadly. I mean, as ever, Dan, lovely question, complex question as well, and I fully understand why you're asking it. I think it's massively valid. We're in an interesting place at the moment, and some of it has been touched upon already in discussion. The relevance of the white paper is huge, and realistically, none of us knows what that says. We have an indication. We know that inclusion is going to form a major component of that white paper, and I don't think that anyone would argue about that. However, that said, it's never one size fits all. And, you know, inevitably that makes life a little bit more complex as well. When Hazel was talking earlier on around her experience of schools and schools' approaches, you know, some of those children will be subject to diagnosis, some of those children won't be subject to diagnosis. Some of the evidence from some of those schools is really, really exemplary. But we're talking, in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about a small percentage of schools. So on one hand, great, I welcome the white paper. I can't wait to see what the white paper sees, word for word, and nor can I wait to see what support we will have to accompany what the white paper says as well. Because what we need to do is we need to expand, and we have plans to expand the approach, you know, the change program approach, the inclusivity approach, but we need support to do that. And we also need the associated regulation and legislation, which again goes back to the white paper to enable that. And I've said it once already, I don't want to keep saying the same point. It isn't one size fits all. And again, going back to Hazel's point, for many children, I don't know the proportion. To be honest, I don't need to know the proportion. A diagnosis is necessary and it's important, absolutely, but not for every child. But I think what we've seen is with I can't remember the figure off the top of my head. I don't look at Sarah, she'll pull a funny face at me because she's told me so many times. But the small proportion of schools that we've successfully worked with who all have their individualistic approaches, which isn't just about training. It's about a variety of approaches and responses in terms of really being inclusive with our cohort of pupils. You know, it demonstrates that it's possible. It's about expanding that as best as possible as well. So it's not a simple answer. I guess that's the starter for 10. No doubt that Sarah and Daniela may want to chip in.
Thank you. That was a nice introduction. Sarah and Daniela, do you want to chip in?
I'm not sure that I can add anything that is materially any more valuable. I think all the points that have been made, you know, are correct. I think in terms of understanding the education system, what the problems are, what the barriers are, what the challenges are, what works. I think for colleagues in Worcestershire, in terms of an education system, is relatively large. It's not the largest, you'll know that. We have the complexity of a fragmented education system, a mix of maintained academy schools. We do have a slightly larger representation of large single academy trusts in the high school system. That does have a factor that impacts on leadership, which impacts on management, which impacts on capacity and culture in schools. What we do have is it's difficult to measure in a quantifiable way, but we have a good link and network out into our school system. And we have challenge that works well, but it is a weekly iteration of, there is no standstill. You have to keep looking at data, you have to keep listening to feedback, you have to keep applying yourself in the place it's needed most to make change. along with working more widely with external agencies like Ofsted, like the Department for Education, to make sure that we're getting the right support in for our schools. So.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, to use a familiar expression, it's sometimes a little bit like herding cats, isn't it? It's about listening, adapting to change that's happening all of the time and very complex, but I appreciate your explanation. Did you want to come in on that point specifically, Justin? Because I've got Anthony waiting, or you...
It was around actually the assessment pathways.
Do you want to put your mic on for me? Anthony, you okay with this? Yeah? Cool.
Sorry, ahead. It was just, as you know, listening to this, absolutely fascinating. And it was just a question really that comes into my mind about how much scope there is to re-engineer assessment and diagnosis pathways based on increasing knowledge of ADHD. So what I mean by that is 10, 20 years ago, ADHD diagnosis was binary. You either had it or you didn't. And the treatment was Ritalin. And so we now know much more and we understand much more about ADHD. For example, the different cognitive functions. It's almost like a spectrum. Now, in some countries, like Belgium, they look at, as part of that assessment, 9 cognitive functions. And so my question really is, if you start to bring in that increasing understanding, is there scope for building into the triage, what are the most, if you like, making an initial assessment based on the most impactful difficulty, like, for example, working memory. A young person struggling with working memory, that is the most impactful difficulty in terms of education. So is there scope, rather than waiting for a diagnosis 18 months down the line, if that triage is able to assess at the basic level the most impactful function and then steer very quickly into something which looks specifically at that, because then in terms of getting support in school very quickly, if working memory is the most impactful difficulty area, you could make changes very quickly in terms of their education. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to me, certainly, and especially if it's a model that's working elsewhere in the world that we can perhaps have a look at. But I think if it makes a difference to the well-being of that young person as well, to feel like they are succeeding because that predominant thing that has been identified and as an issue is tackled, then why not look at it? But I'm not a clinical expert, so I'm not the right person to answer that question. So, Jade.
Yeah, certainly. So you're absolutely right. We don't want it to be these are the 2 diagnostic tests we do, and this is the standardised approach as an outcome to the level of need that a child has. That's absolutely unethical. What we are thinking about is setting up a neurodivergent service. So it doesn't matter whether it's ADHD, autism, or something else, because you're right, the world is changing, our understanding of neurodivergence is changing. So we have to future-proof the service, don't we? So we're thinking of having that with a single front door, because families have told us it's very complex, your NHS. There are multiple doors, so we're going to have one door. And we will then start to build up something we call in the NHS advice and guidance. So not only is that triage being effectively worked and pulling out what's the most important issue, but actually, rather than waiting for a child to go through, if I am the teacher in the school or the SENCO, I can pick up the telephone and speak to somebody and say, this is what I'm seeing. While this child's coming to you for that process, could you just help me out on this? It looks like this. What are some of the things you could suggest? So that would be very much something we would seek to put in place within the 3 years. And then it's very much, I know colleagues have said, it's a multidisciplinary team, because you've got educational psychology equally also available to offer that support, and our network of SENCOs. So you're absolutely right. That's the type of service we're aiming for, not a black and white, go through this and this is the output.
Good to know. Thank you. And thanks for chipping in with that question, Justin. Okay, Anthony, you've got something you wanted to ask, and then I'm going to come to Seb and see how we're doing for time before I decide what we do next. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question, please, around Priority Action Plan, Action 1, Paragraph 10. at the bottom there, the work in Priority Action Plan 1 by the Worcestershire SEND Partnership has been organised into 3 work streams, and one of those is Team Around the Child in Schools Early Prevention. You're talking of a pilot in the Wyre Forest for CYP, that is a neighbourhood health approach change programme. 2 questions: has this commenced, and what are we expecting, and when are we expecting to get feedback from this?
Thanks, Anthony. I think Jade mentioned that it was off the ground already, but Sarah, are you answering this one?
I'll answer this one because I've chaired the first meeting of it. So, yes, it is off the ground in terms of bringing a range of professionals together with a group of schools. And in terms of first feedback at, I guess you would mean this scrutiny panel. I think this is quite a it is a relevant aspect of trying to understand how our health system partners and schools can work more closely together. So I think it's relevant in terms of this will be really interesting to see how we can change things practically for children and families to get that support to get that support more meaningfully and earlier to children and families. So I would expect that this meeting and this regular review will want to understand feedback about the so what. It is very early days because the first, I think the first aspect is getting the right people round the table. Sorry, Councillor, trying to make eye contact with you at the same time. Is getting the right people around the table and making sure that we're hearing the child and young person and family voice. You know, what's really important to understand, I guess, about this partnership is it's a multi-academy trust that is committing its resources and leadership, because you have to have the culture to want to make this change. The Multi-Academy Trust is engaged with some of the other initiatives. For example, some of their schools, their primary schools, are in the PINS programme. And then it is a case of working with our health partners. Jade and Sonia won't mind me saying it's complicated getting the right person in the room to be able to be part of that conversation and make suggestions for a way forward. But in that first multidisciplinary team meeting that I chaired before Christmas, we were able to, with the voice and child and young and family, look at 2 examples. So 2's tiny, isn't it? And as a result, make some practical changes there and then. So it's early days. I think this meeting will continue to want to know what's happening with that particular piece of work.
Thank you. I think on behalf of us all, we'd say yes. We would like regular updates. It's a good piece of work in the early stages that sounds really promising. So in terms of the panel, Seb, I'm going to come to you. And then Debbie, I think you've got a question that you wanted to ask. And then again, I'll see where we are with time. Okay.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Mine's just really simple, and perhaps there's 2 prongs to it. So perhaps a question first part to Adam as the officer, and then perhaps there's a politician element to it as well. We talk a lot about sort of SEND spaces, and I know the big sort of elephant in the room at the moment is the new SEND school in Malvern, and as well that there's the potential that the offering has been made by government that we can either have money or we can have a school. So I was wondering, from an officer point of view, where are we in that conversation? And then from a politician, for perhaps Councillor Foster, will he keep advocating for a new school and not just a dispersal of funds to other provisions?
Thank you. On the first point, I think we did hear before Christmas that government had made an announcement around its free SEND schools, which obviously worried a lot of us. And I know, Adam, I spoke to you at the time about it, and you were going to be meeting DFE. So could you possibly give us an update on the situation in terms of what the offers were from DFE around the school and whether you're confident it will still be built? Thank you.
Okay. So preceding everything I'm about to say, ultimately decision, cabinet decision. So watch this space. So we're not in a position where we are definitively determined we will go one route or the other. However, I will proffer an opinion. yes, I did meet with the DFE, so it was literally just before Christmas. Many free schools have been cancelled across the country and indeed regionally as well. The situation with regard to the Malvern Free School, this voice thing is obviously infectious. Excuse me. The situation with regard to the Malvern Free School is we're in a position where we are good to go now, and we are also mindful of the fact that this has already been delayed. So we were looking at a September 27 completion. We met with the DFE then, and we, the Royal We, myself and Sarah, recently met with the Regional Director of the DFE to ask some more specific questions. We're in the position in Worcestershire where essentially we have a choice. Choice 1, continue with the build. Choice 2, cancel the build and take £5.7 million. My opinion, and I am not cabinet, I am not a decision maker, my opinion at this juncture is it would make most sense to continue with the school build, especially when we look at the cohort of pupils that that school is designed for. But again, I'll say it, this is subject to cabinet discussion, and imminently there will be an education sufficiency paper as well, which will be presented, and that will encompass this element. The most recent conversation with the DFE were obvious questions that we as officers asked of the DFE. If a decision is made to opt for a continuation of the school, what does that mean in terms of timescales for delivery? Bearing in mind it's already been subject to delay. I can't give you a definitive answer. Because we didn't get a definitive answer. The suggestion is that we could be looking up to 3 years. So in other words, it may be September 29, could be September 28, I don't know. The next question, the obvious question we asked is, once a decision has been reported to the DFE, and there's a cut-off point, which is the 27th of February for that, we then wanted to know, okay, and thereafter, when will you let us know around associated completion timescales? To be fair to the DFE, they have to reprofile, and it's not just our response, it's responses across this land. So they've got to take all of those into consideration. As a general estimation from the DFE in terms of hearing back from them, quote unquote, summer 26. That's as comprehensive an answer as I can give you. And I'm certainly not going to talk for Councillor Foster, suffice to say, we're not yet at Cabinet.
No, thanks, Adam. Definitive answers are important, and we appreciate you giving us the answers or next best guesses that you can give us based on the information that you've got. I think we all came into the meeting just wanting a bit of clarity around the options that were available, and it's good to have some timescales now in terms of the 27th of February deadline to DFE. Councillor Foster, as it is a cabinet decision, would you like to contribute at this point from your perspective?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can contribute at this point. It's highly unlikely, even with the projected delays, as long as Adam is suggesting to 28 or 29, it's highly unlikely that we would want to take £5.7 million, highly unlikely. The DFE's and the government's point of view in offering that money because where the schools have been cancelled, they've provided the money, they haven't offered it as an alternative. Ours is an alternative. The rationale behind that is that it will be investments in SEND provision in mainstream facilities as a quicker route. These are the government of the DFE's terms. We're already doing that wherever possible, and what we are desperately short of is SEND school capacity, and this is a 120-place school in Malvern that's already been approved. We would be all but certain to continue down that route, and it's just very unfortunate that delays are considered to be possibly as long as a year or 2 years, and we will aim to actually get them to commit, because let's face it, there's hardly any schools that they've cancelled, most of them, get them to commit to this one on time if at all possible.
Thank you. It's good to hear that the two of you seem to be on the same page with this one. And I admire you for trying to apply some rationale to government decision making. That's quite a brave thing to do. But I think we all agree that there is a bit of a desert when it comes to provision in Worcestershire and the south of Worcestershire in particular with Malvern. You know, Evesham, I've heard whispers that things at the Vale school are a bit shaky there. So that's one that we're obviously keeping on as a committee. But Seb, you want to come back?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I pressed another button.
I've got a theme tune now. Just really quickly, because this is the last time this panel will meet before that deadline. Can I just get absolute clarity then? So on the 5th of Feb's cabinet meeting, the recommendation will be that we carry on with the school and not accept the funding. Just a really specific yes or no, because I think people are anxious, and I think we just need a bit of clarity because we won't have an opportunity to scrutinise that decision now.
That's certainly what I was picking up, but Councillor Foster, do you want to confirm?
That'd be a yes then.
Thank you very much. Debbie, I know you wanted to ask a question, but Hazel, is it on this particular point that you wanted to speak? And then Debbie's will be the last question. Okay.
The parent carers would be interested in contributing to that decision making, if that's made possible at all, but I think it would be a yes from us for a school as well.
Okay, that's certainly a recommendation that we can consider, I think, Hazel. Thank you. Debbie, sorry, you've waited very patiently there at the back. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. Bearing in mind that we're sort of coming up to 18 months into the original action plan, which was submitted in August 24, how is the partnership planning to independently measure whether families, and including those that suffer inequalities, who don't generally engage with forums, online groups or co-production opportunities, are actually experiencing improvements? Certainly from my inbox, I get the impression that they're not experiencing any improvements at all. So will you commit to a county-wide survey of all parent carers and establish whether these actions are translating into real change actually on the ground?
Good question. Inclusivity, you know, I was about to say to Matthew, actually, well done for speaking up on behalf of young people, but you can't possibly speak up on behalf of all young people. So hearing a variety of voices is really important, Debbie. So what would be the comeback on that one? Who wants to answer? Don't know. Adam?
I suspect it will be a tag team response. Can I just ask a quick question? Committing to a survey, is that a survey for the partnership to undertake or a survey for Health Watch to undertake? Because I know that Health Watch have undertaken a number of surveys in the past.
The partnership, I would say, because certainly from where I'm looking at it, you need to be able to evidence that the actions that you're taking as part of the action plan are actually impacting on families. Health Watch are obviously due to repeat our EHCP survey, but that will be later on, I suspect probably about the summertime. But obviously that doesn't measure all the actions in the plan.
No, thank you. Adam?
So my response to you is going to be quite a broad response, deliberately so. So there's a number of ways. So you heard earlier on around the deep dive that's recently been undertaken, and we'll get the formal letter with regard to that deep dive fairly soon, and obviously we would share that next time round at Overview and Scrutiny as well. So the deep dive obviously fits into part of that response in terms of external scrutineers for all intents and purposes, looking, seeing, forming a view around that. We have our own and revised quality assurance process. Daniela might add a bit of meat on the bones with regard to that, just to try and bring that to life for you. And again, that in its own right has been subject to deep dive as well. What I would say is there's a real, I mean, ironically, Hazel and myself, amongst others, met at the back end of last week, and we were talking around communications, partnership communications. Now, I think there's a relevance to communications in terms of answering you, because there's something about the wider we go out to parent carers and families and enable that update, that understanding, that greater understanding around what is going on, it also garners the ability for those same parent carers to come back to us in far greater numbers. You know, it's easy for individuals, not easy, but some individuals are better practiced at doing that and well accustomed to doing that. There are plenty of individuals who are not, who may not even contemplate it. Essentially, if you open up the lines of communication, it garners that as well. So for me, the broad answer is it's a combination of the deep dive, a relevance to communications, a relevance to quality assurance, and again, as you'll know, the self-evaluation is being pulled together by the partnership as a whole, and a significant element of that is parent-carer feedback as well, albeit what I don't want to do in any sense whatsoever is suggest that's every single parent-carer, which goes back to my earlier point. But
yeah, I'd say it's a very, very small proportion. And I suppose what I would come back with is, without a survey, how can you evidence to the DofE or to other families that the actions taken since August 24 are actually resulting in real improvements rather than just simply increased activity?
all of the above that I said, but that makes it sound like I'm being defensive and I'm unprepared to undertake a survey, which is not what I'm saying. I think in terms of survey, in terms of those considerations, that's more than an appropriate conversation, especially when we're talking about a partnership, to have within the context of committee, and to actually garner that and raise that as a conversation point and make that determination. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not opposed to it at all. And I think the ethos, my sense, is the ethos of the partnership is the wider we can go, the better that is. And the survey is exactly on the same merit as that. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. I think that was a good to and fro. I don't know, Daniela, was there anything you wanted to add, or should we?
We can move on. I can add about the depth of the quality assurance programme and the development of that, if that's helpful at this point, or if we're happy to continue a conversation offline about the survey.
Yeah, I think the point is noted, Debbie, and we do, again, value your contribution. And I think perhaps if we continue the conversation about how we can all work together to achieve what it is that you're looking for, and I think it's admirable, obviously, then yeah, I think we'll move on, if that's okay. All right. Brilliant. Okay, so I think again we've had a really robust discussion. Slightly different this time because we've got Matthew, our young person here. So thank you again. I'm not going to do you a round of applause because that's really embarrassing. But please come back and see us again. And I think, do I need to capture some recommendations now, or are people that have contributed and not staying welcome to go now? I can't remember which way around it is. Sorry, Sam.
We've captured the actions. If there are any specific recommendations that the panel wants to make, if you could sum them up, that would be great.
Okay. I mean, I personally think that we ought to write a formal thank you to Matthew, and I know that Lydia was due to come as well today, and hopefully she'll be able to be involved in future. But I think if we write a formal thank you from us as a committee to Matthew to say how much we valued his contribution. Yeah? Okay. Any other recommendations that have come out? Obviously, there are lots of things that we'll be bringing back to this discussion because this is an ongoing improvement plan and it's quite organic, and we see, you know, improvements, however small they might be, each time that we meet. So I think there are some new initiatives that that perhaps are being introduced that we will want to see more detail on as they come forward. But in terms of specifics, Sam?
I think Councillor Upton said that we need to have an update on the White Forest
absolutely that. Yeah, on the pilot project that Sarah talked about in White Forest schools, which is in its infancy. But apart from that, we obviously will see this coming back to us again in a couple of meetings' time. Okay, we happy to move on? Great. So thank you all again for your contribution, and please enjoy the rest of your day, or you can stay if you want to. We'll just give you some time to shuffle about and bring some people forward that have been sitting at the back. Thank you. We'll just give things a couple of minutes to settle down, yeah? Adam, please do, yeah. No, that's fine. Okay, we'll just wait for Steph to find a seat at the front. And Adam's just had to step out to take an urgent call, but I think we'll carry on and Adam can catch up when he rejoins us, if that's okay with everyone. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 6, budget scrutiny. So we've already kind of gone through attendance, but I'll go through it again. So we've got both Cabinet members here, Councillor Stephen Foster and Councillor Justin Bowen. Adam will be back, I'm sure. And we have Steph Simcox, Deputy Chief Financial Officer, who is actually going to be presenting the report that we have in our agenda pack. So this is obviously an opportunity for us to undertake a pre-budget setting scrutiny, which is an opportunity that I'm sure we'll all welcome, despite the fact that we've had lots of meetings around budget and finance, but obviously given the situation we're in, it's really vitally important. So for guidance, during this meeting, we're being asked to determine any comments on the draft 26-27 budget for reporting back to the Overview and Scrutiny Panel Board meeting being held on the 26th of January, okay, so quite shortly. And I'm specifically really looking for questions and comments relating to the impact of exceptional financial support and council tax proposal, any further savings opportunities that we as a panel would like to wish the Cabinet to consider for 26-27 or future years, and any further issues that we as a panel would wish the Cabinet to consider in relation to the 26-27 budget or medium-term financial plan. So lots to think about, quite a broad scope, and the meetings are coming quite thick and fast, aren't they? So let's move on to Steph, who's going to present the report to us. Thanks, Steph.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. And I echo Chair's comments about the amount of meetings that we're talking about finance. And I know Monday morning, there's a couple of people who've heard this already at Scrutiny on Friday, and also many times over the last couple of weeks. However, it is vitally important that we ensure that this panel has the chance to have a look at in their own time and scrutinise the information within the draft Cabinet report that's coming, that was approved, the Cabinet report that was approved of the draft budget. You've got another chance to have a look at certain things on the 5th of February and also the full council meeting on the 26th of February. So those are the things that are sort of my deadlines in my head at the moment. But what I want to be able to do today is obviously give you the opportunity to consider exactly what the Chairman has just said, but also the opportunity to look at in a little bit more detail, should you wish to, those areas that are impacting on the budget for children's services, including obviously home to school transport, which is in the remit of this panel. So the where we are in the information that you've had circulated, if you can go to the rather interesting and pretty look of slides. It's a slide that looks like the green and pleasant land of Worcestershire, and it's in the slide deck is entitled Budget Scrutiny Panels, Financial Context and Budget 2026. I understand that people are looking at various different printouts on screens and various different ways. If you're looking at a printout, it's on page 23. If you're looking at it on screen, it's on page 27, but it's the one that's all purpley if you've printed it out on colour, but just looks a mess if you print it on black and white. It's absolutely that one that the Chair's holding up. So I'm not going to go through every slide in infinite detail, you'll be pleased to hear, but I will be picking up the key points of each of the slides. There's not many of them, she says, tongue-in-cheek, but you have seen the majority of them before. So the first one's dead easy, it's the holding slide. The information relating to the County Council as a whole for period 8 is showing what looks like a break-even position, which it is after the use of corporate savings, but we are showing an overspend for the County Council for its service delivery, its direct services to the public, of around 11.3 million. sorry to say the biggest overspender is children's services, but we've talked about that a lot over the last 6 months, very closely followed by adults. Not that I'm saying that the two directors are in competition, but it's very, very close, those two positions at the moment. Going on to the savings, the majority of the corporate savings are being met, albeit there is a small element within the children's services savings which isn't being met at the moment, and that's for a particular purpose, and it's to do with Vale Lodge. So the Cabinet member and the director are looking at the most effective use of this facility before a decision is made one way or another. And what we want to make sure is that we are doing the best for our children with the resources that we've got. So we're taking a pause and reflect on that particular issue, which is why we've got an overspend area and a non-delivery of saving. But Adam and the team are identifying alternatives to offset about half of that saving. So moving on to DSG, we've been talking a lot about DSG, and I can absolutely understand that this panel may have a number of questions about DSG, but we are looking again at the overspend position and the cumulative deficit position by the end of this and next financial year being quite a sizable sum. We await the government's white paper on this. We're hoping in the spring, and we're also awaiting some information as part of the final settlement about how we can how the government are going to hopefully help us with funding of that deficit. So we will report back as soon as we've got the information as part of the final settlement on that. Not wanting to repeat it, but you'll be aware of the statutory and key recommendations from our external auditors. I'm now on my slide number 7, which is page 29. The draft settlement announced on the 17th of December, all of the information was included in the Cabinet report, but the overall impact of that was, as a county council, we're around 7 million less than we expected it to be. So albeit we did have additional funding in the settlement, just under 3 million of that was really welcomed in relation to children's social care preventative activity. However, as a county council, we've received less than we forecast. So we've had to adjust the exceptional financial support report for that additional 7 million that we didn't get through the settlement. The information on my slide number 8, which has got a table on it, just shows that although we absolutely welcome the knowledge that we have a 3-year settlement, it's the first time in probably 20 years that we've had a 3-year settlement, and we really do welcome having the knowledge of what's coming for the next couple of years. What's not particularly helpful is the numbers within it. So we are only getting just over £1 million for 27, 28 and 28, 29 once you take council tax into account. So obviously central government assume all local authorities are going to put council tax up by 4.99%. And that is part of what they're calling core spending power. It's the power that the local authorities have got to spend. So if we put council tax up by 4.99% for the next couple of years, the government are giving us a grand total of £1 million a year to cover all of our additional expenditure on adults, children's, home to school and all our other very, very key services. So what does that mean for this financial year? You've seen this table a number of times, the 71.9 million. Not going to go through it, but happy to take any questions. The savings on my slide number 10, obviously this was changed at Cabinet and full council, so the figure is now £160,000 less than this number. The saving relating to countryside centres and unavailable routes were not approved, so when you see the Cabinet report for the 5th of February, they won't be there. So that number is obviously now out of date, but obviously we had to publish this before the full council meeting. The overall council position again is repeated, just in a different format, to show you the figure that would be the amount from the council tax and the adult social care levy if we set the council tax at 4.99%. All scrutinies have had have asked me in the past for the information relating to reserves and what reserves have we got as a county council. So slide number 12 gives you a breakdown of the reserves that we had at the end of last financial year and the forecast going up to the end of 28-29. The key one there is obviously the risk reserve, which is hovering around the 21.5 million, and that's assuming we use the 15 million in its entirety this financial year. We then talk about the council tax and the flexibility allowed or not, as the case may be, depending on the outcome of the Secretary of State's view on our exceptional financial support. Every 1% council tax gives you 3.6 million. So we have been talking about this for quite a while now, and the letter that was sent back to government on the 12th of December did ask for council tax up to 5% above the maximum level. So that's 9.99% to be specific. It's obviously not officers' decision. It's not ultimately central government's decision. It's their decision whether they allow us to consider it, and it will then be up to full council to make that decision. A 5% above the current cap gives you obviously 18 million. So if, that was the decision, the borrowing through the exceptional financial support of 71.9 would go down by the 18. So the 71.9 is the total. Whatever we get or not through the increase in council tax brings that number down. So the borrowing is less the higher the council tax is. We are still and will remain one of the lowest council tax in the country in our comparator group. Even with an additional 9.99%, we will still be below the average, assuming every other local authority in our group puts it up by the 4.99%. So how challenging are the next 3 years going to be? Obviously, particularly challenging, quite challenging indeed. However, we are looking at transformational changes. Further information on that will come as part of the February Cabinet report. We are looking at a lot of work internally. Each of the directors are continuing to look at their own budgets. I know Councillor Bowen has talked in previous meetings about the excellent work that's been done relating to foster carers and reviewing our in-house versus external services. So there'll be a lot of work done over the next 6 to 12 months, because we all know that Section 114 notice isn't the answer, because we'll have to do everything that we're currently doing, but obviously with government scrutiny on top of that as well. And what it does also mean is more stringent cuts on key services. There'll be a commissioner leadership control over it, and a likelihood that there's more uncertainty for staff, for our key partners, and an absolute reduced ability for our own members to influence any key decisions and outcomes. So it's absolutely vital that we do it, I won't say to ourselves, but do it with ourselves, to ourselves, rather than having external people coming and kind of doing it to us. So the process for the next couple of months is on slide number 17, but we will continue to lobby central government, as we have been doing, not just for additional funding for our general fund, our normal day-to-day budgets, but also for the right level of funding for high needs, special education needs, the right level of policy decisions, and where funding follows decisions, local authorities should get the right level of funding to provide the right and adequate level of support for our children and young people. So just very briefly then, how does this relate to children's? I mentioned earlier on that children's services, particularly in social care and the all-age disability services, are overspending. All-age disability services due to the inability to recruit permanently to some very, what are quite high-paid external consultants in our Ed Psychs area and other areas whilst we prepare children for their pre-EHCPs or plans for EHCPs and then their final EHCPs in the end. Absolutely crucial activity that we need to continue to do as promptly as we possibly can. The cost of that is higher for the local authority because it needs to get in agency staff often and locums and consultants rather than being able to recruit. It's a very competitive market. But what we are seeing is an underspend on home to school transport. What I don't want people to think is that that's a reduction in service delivery. It absolutely isn't. What this is a more efficient and effective way to deliver that transport rather than having less children transported. So what has happened is every single one of our contracts is being reviewed to make sure it's best value and it provides value for money for us and also the right service for our children. So there has been reductions in the contract value. That is price, not volume. What we're also getting is more children being able to access transport with other children where that is possible. So rather than 6 individual taxis going to the same place, we're looking at small minibuses being used. Now, obviously, that has to be based on the needs of the child. So if the child cannot travel with other children for their own personal reasons, that doesn't happen. But where there is the ability for children to travel with each other, and often that's helpful for children because they get support from others. But I have to stress it has to be based on the child's EHCP. So overall, there's a reduction in the expenditure on home to school transport. But again, bearing in mind we did put 10 million into the budget this financial year. It is a growing budget, even though we are currently underspending. I think I've talked about the headlines quite a lot, but on slide 19 you'll see a key point that during October we had 2 children placed in secure placements. We haven't used secure placements this year until these 2 young people were requiring them. And the average cost for those 2 placements is over £18,000 a week. And that's after negotiation, hard negotiation by the brokerage team. Should those 2 children stay for a full financial year, that would cost 1.9 million. Work is obviously ongoing because that secure unit is not a long-term facility for children. It's not, if their needs can change, they will go into a more cost-effective residential placement, for probably first of all. But obviously we've got to make sure that those children are safe and provided the right care for them as individuals. And then slide 20 gives you a breakdown of how the next year's budget is drafted, and that will show you the pay contract growth. And I do want to make it really clear that the savings in here are not savings in children's services delivery. They are the pro rata of the savings relevant to the pension fund reductions. So you'll have heard discussed at Cabinet that we've done the regular review of our contributions to the pension fund, and we've been able to reduce the employer's contribution because we're fully funded. So that is having a saving across the council of just over £2 million. The proportion of that relevant to children's services staff is 641,000. So it's about just under a third of that 2 million is relevant to staff within children's. It is not a reduction in staff. It is not a reduction in service. It's a cost to the council of the pension fund. I need to make that really clear. And then on the last but one slide, I've given you the paragraph references to the Cabinet report so that you can tie all the numbers and the conversations back. There's a bit of information on there relevant to the jiggery-pokery that governments have done, and it does appear jiggery-pokery. It took me 2 days to work it all out. The grants in and out, it's a bit like the okey-cokey, what they've done with the children's grants, but broadly, they've transferred most of them into the core spending power, and they've given us more. I think ultimately that's all we need to know. They've given us £2.9 million more than we had last year, which is a bonus for us, and absolutely well received. They've also increased the holiday activities and food grants slightly by another £50,000, which again is absolutely critical to some of our families in Worcestershire who need support during the holidays, not only for the parents but most importantly for the children. And we are pleased that the government is continuing that at the tune of 1.682 million in next financial year. So there is a summary on page 44, and then, as I say, I'm repeating myself on page 45 relating to the savings. So I hope that gives you a little bit more detail on how it comes across for children's services. But as always, happy to take any financial comments and questions, and I'll very quickly pass on to my colleagues to the right for anything operational. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Steph. Obviously, we've all read the report, but having you here to talk us through it, I think just gives that level of understanding that I particularly need when it comes to finance. It's not one of my strongest points, I have to say, but and I think you've taken us through things as quickly as you possibly can with such a level of detail, and you've preempted the issues that we would like to pick up on. So, for example, I know you'd be expecting us to be asking questions around DSG. Thanks for highlighting the disappointing detail of the 3-year settlement. Which won't really help us meet our deficits. And I do have trust issues with government at the moment, even without the jiggery-pokery that you've spoken about. Thanks for mentioning the home-to-school transport savings that weren't voted through at council last week, so we'll need some readjustments there in the savings. But yeah, really helpful to have you here to talk us through that. Are there any other... Adam, do you want to chip in at this point? I'm sure you do.
You've all heard me talk so much about it, so I'm not going to sort of rehearse some of those conversations like member seminars, perhaps the most recent conversation where I gave the children's context. I think the only thing I would add is it's the very, as much as the phrase I keep using with people, and I'm not convinced it's an appropriate phrase, is the healthy heartbeat in terms of our overall looked after children population. Healthy heartbeat would be next to none, frankly. We'd always have some, but next to none. We peaked November, December. So the figures that Steph is referring to are based on those figures. For whatever reason, the same happened this time last year. We're looking for a pattern. We can't find a pattern other than the accommodation of large sibling groups for whatever reason. That number's gone down. So as of 15 minutes ago, I got this week's figures in. So we've gone from 1,068 to 1,039 looked after children. The relevance of that being, without getting all micro about it all, is when Steph talks about 2 children in secure accommodation, for example, and 18 grand a week, and what does that equate to over 6 months, over 12 months? It's huge figures. Well, equally, the relevance when we go from 1068 to 1039 is significant figures, when I know for a fact some of those children were in expensive residential placements. But it shows that ongoing, what's the word? Fight, challenge, battle, balance, whatever the word is or words are, that we continue to prioritise within children's services to try and keep that number down. But at the end of the day, it's got to be children's outcome centric. You know, that's the most important thing, because the last thing we want to do is for children who were looked after to either step down or no longer be looked after to then bounce back again. But that's not the way we should and do operate.
No, thanks for that added context. It's important to remember that we're talking about children and young people here, aren't we, at the end of the day? And I know that their outcomes are really important to all of us. So thank you. Justin, Stephen, I think we'll move to you for any comment. Okay, marvellous. Stephen?
Thank you. Thank you. It's catching, isn't it? Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, some of the finances and then some good news, really. Read the budget. In the recent fair funding review, the high needs funding block was increased by a further £721 million nationally. Of that, our share was an increase of £8.2 million. That was from 97.6 to 105.8 million, which will obviously not meet the current pressure, including making no impact to reduce the high needs deficit, which, although it's still kept off our balance sheet, we still have to service the debt. So we've been told by local government Minister Alison McGovern plans to resolve this will be discussed shortly. We welcome that. And there's a first meeting to discuss this on the 23rd of January, when the proposed white paper on SEND will also be discussed. Now, I've attended all 5 online Teams meeting sessions, which are now completed, on the consultation held by the Schools Minister, George Gould. I'm sorry that Hazel's gone, but she'll no doubt catch up with this later. Everything our Parent Carer Forum colleagues and others have requested has been offered in these sessions. More plans, that's EHCPs, of better quality. This is word for word from the Minister's mouth. More plans of better quality, written by educationalists, still in a legally binding framework, with full accountability for these to be delivered, without a fight. I and others did detect that this would be for children with the most complex needs, where there's an emphasis on inclusion in mainstream settings with a higher degree of training for teaching staff, which is what we've discussed earlier. We welcome the consultation and the results of all of this and await the white paper soon. Clearly, I'm sharing with you, Madam Chair, it sounds too good to be true, but we live in hope. So, my conclusion from the 5 sessions is that the funding is going to focus on expansion of SEND in mainstream settings, which fits in with the Malvern Free School position, where they would love us to take the £5.7 million rather than build the school, which I've just said is not the route we're likely to go down. So I think, while I personally think it's right, wherever possible, to put a child in the mainstream setting, there will always be, and there is an increasing demand, an overwhelming demand to accommodate children with complex needs in special school capacity. And there is a need to provide special school capacity for children with lower complex needs, for example, emotional-based school avoidance. The idea of sending a child that has EBSA to a high school that has 1,500 pupils, they don't even get through the gates, let alone get an education. So from a government point of view, and the country's finances, let alone the county council finances, I can well understand why they would go down this route, and that is what I expect to see in the white paper as regards how they'll provide the rest of what they've offered, I don't know. But the good news to this end, despite the social media that I don't look at, but Joel Dalton emailed me about to the effect that we appear to be reducing our SEND capacity or SEND provision in Worcestershire County Council. On the contrary, this administration will approve on February 5th Cabinet an ambitious plan to significantly expand SEND school capacity. A long-held ambition of mine, which I actually mentioned, Madam Chair, you'll remember, at our very first meeting, a spend to save plan to provide increased, that's our own Worcestershire County Council capacity, school in a central Worcestershire location, not only to meet the increased demand, but also, excuse me, also saving the costs of home to school transport and significantly reduce the higher costs of independent schools that we often have children bused to or taxied to over long distances at prohibitive costs. Well, I have to tell you, this is commercially sensitive information, so I cannot share the details of this today. But if we are successful, which I think we are highly likely to be, this is such a big deal. Not only will this be a Worcestershire good news story, but it'll have wider national significance, and of course it'll have major positive outcome on pupil outcomes, as well as our budget finances. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hang on a sec. So, yeah, thank you, Stephen, and thank you for providing us with your commitment to further invest in SEND in Worcestershire, and also your commitment around recommendations to Cabinet about the Morven School. Both are really welcome. There was a lot for me to take in as I was trying to concentrate, but I think...
Sorry, Madam, I'll be repeating it on the February the 5th.
Of course, and I'm sure that there'll be a couple of questions that might give you another opportunity today as well. But I'm pleased that perhaps we're getting a bit more clarity from government around EHCPs, because at one point they were deciding to cancel them altogether and replace them with something else, which might not have been the right thing. But I also know that the LGA are meeting, the Children, Young People and Families Group meet at the end of this month, and I shall be attending that. So hopefully we'll hear more detail on the SEND white paper then, if not before then. But obviously we do need to see the detail in that. But yeah, thank you for your contribution. I'm going to move to the panel for questions. I'm going to take them in this order, just to give you a heads up. So we've got Anthony first, then Seb, then Matt, then Dan, then Mel, then Sam, and we'll see where we're at. And I also noticed that we've got Councillor Robinson at the back, so let's see how we get on with what we've got first, okay? So first of all, Anthony, please.
Thank you. Just a quick question for Steph, please. A point of clarification. On the savings on the home to school transport, you've got two figures here. The first one is slide 3, provisional outturn at the end of November, period 8. Is that slide 3? I think it is, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. You've got minus 6 million there. Okay, that was from the paragraph 41 of the 13th Jan Cabinet report. On slide 10, total savings identified to date of 4.6 million. That's also from table 15, paragraph 106 of the 13th of Jan Cabinet report. So, and I'm not going to name names, but I'd also heard a figure, which might be just something I've made up in my head, of 8 million. Can you just clarify where we are and what we're really looking to have as an outturn on the savings towards the end of the financial year, please?
Thanks, Steph.
Yeah, I can do. First of all, they're all talking about different financial years. So the 6 million underspend is in 25-26, so that's this financial year that we're in at the moment. So by the end of March 2026, the budget for 25-26 25-26 is forecast to be 6 million underspent. The information on slide 10 is about 26-27. So for the financial year commencing April 2026, so next financial year, the budget that we forecast would have growth, demand, etc., but also have savings of 4.64 associated with it. So that's where the 6 million comes from, is this year, 4.46 is next year. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure about the 8 million figure, where I'm not sure where you have picked that one up from. So if you could just tell me what slide that was on, I can give you the answer on that one.
Yeah, I think from what Councillor Upton said, it wasn't in the slide, it was something he'd heard rather than something he'd seen in the pack. Is that right, Councillor Upton?
Yeah, it is. I don't know if I picked it up on an email. I can't honestly remember, but I mean, it's irrelevant, I suppose. I just wondered if you knew that figure, but it's pointless chasing it. I might be able to find it if I go back to the emails, but
I was going to suggest if it's something that you want to follow up after the meeting and you can find it, then I'm sure Steph would be happy to look at that for you.
Yeah, more than happy. If you want to drop me an email, I'm more than happy to respond. It's not a problem at all.
Yeah,
Fabulous. Thank you. So, Steph, over to you next. I think the first question is around DSG.
Do you mean Seb there, Chair?
Seb, I did
rather
say
than
Seb.
Steph. It came across as Steph. I thought
No, I
I've
definitely
changed
said Seb.
everything. That's fine. Yeah, a couple of things, if that's okay, but I'll ask them one at the time. The first one is the in-year overspend. By the look of the pack, it looks like we're due to end this year with £100 million overspend. My quick maths would say that, if we raised council tax and only used it to pay off the overspend, it'd be a 28% increase. So I'm just trying to work out, from Steph's point of view as an officer, what controls do we have in place just to make sure that that overspend is only being overspent on the essentials rather than just a generic overspend. And then I have another one, but I'll wait for that one to come back.
Sure. Do you want to take that one first, Steph, please?
I presume you're talking about the high needs deficit overspend.
Where are you in the pack?
Where are you on the slides?
So on slide 5, it says cumulative deficit, 90.2 to 194.
Yeah, so that's the high needs deficit overspend. So basically we get a grant from central government, which is about half that we need. So we're spending double what the grant is at the moment. So the high needs deficit forecast for this financial year only is 95.7. So that's money going out of our account that we don't have a budget for, basically. As for what it's spent on, it is obviously spent on services for children who have EHCPs, those who are being supported pre-EHCPs. It's relating to the ed psychologist, etc. But if you want detail on what it's spent on specifically, I need to pass that on to the man that knows.
Would you be happy to... Yeah? You want to take it now, Adam?
I am the man.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like code for please don't talk at me for the next 3 hours. In an effort to be helpful in that regard, there's a high needs deficit. We're all well familiar with the horrendous figures that we're talking about, equally familiar with essentially the conflict in terms of legislation and regulations and expectations before we even contemplate the improvement journey that the partnership's on from a SEND perspective. I guess the key headlines of this, without putting words into anyone's mouth, and I think this is related, Children's Overview and Scrutiny will want to have a robust understanding as to what the management plan actually is, what that equates to and what that means in real terms. So, for example, when Grant Thornton presented to Council, someone asked Grant Thornton the question, what sort of things do you want in there? Grant Thornton gave an example of, well, other authorities put in the provision, the building of new schools. Well, there's 60, 70, 80, 90, pick a figure, million. And that's pretty high aiming in terms of high needs deficit management plans. Notwithstanding what Councillor Foster's alluded to, we have already in existence a tracker, if you like, with regard to our approach. We have not been sitting on our hands and doing nothing, and that's publicly available from Audit and Governance Committee. Grant Thornton will be looking at the high needs deficit management plan and forming a view around that and assessing that, and no doubt being very clear and loud and public about that. Prior to that, I would want to bring that to children's overview and scrutiny, and that will specify the detail. The only other bit that I think is helpful, but really, really important, as ever, I think it was the chief exec at, what was our last gathering? Was it a cabinet, a council? I think it was council. I get confused sometimes because we meet a lot. He made reference to, in response to a question around staffing and cutbacks in terms of staffing, and essentially articulated that from a council-wide perspective, we're sort of in that place at this moment in time where we don't have any more slack, we don't have any give. So if we're to cut more staff, there will be a knock-on impact here. When we talk about high needs deficit management, there is a relevance to resource, and not just in the world of children's, in the world of finance, in the world of data, etc., etc. So this is part of our high needs deficit management plan that we're working through as well. So I think, if you're agreeable, more than appropriate for it to come to a future children's overview and scrutiny panel.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think certainly we'd pick up on that as a recommendation. I wasn't sure what the action plan was to get us out of that deficit, so good, thanks. Seb?
Thank you. My last question is to the Cabinet members, so Councillor Foster. Obviously at full council there was a throwaway comment about we're still committed in our budget to bringing a new school to the area. I'm just really trying to drill down of if we could have a bit more of an overview, because obviously I think council all agreed we needed a new school. We're going to have the sufficiency report. Maybe that's the announcement on the 5th of Feb. But obviously this panel, I think, really needs to know what's going on. We can't just have grand announcements in Cabinet and then us try and scrutinise them afterwards. So I just wondering if you could give us a hint, without the commercially sensitive parts, just what is going on with our school places, and will we have the budget remaining to actually build the school?
Thanks. Councillor Foster, are you able to update us without sharing any commercially sensitive information?
Yes. What will be discussed on the February the 5th in relation to Worcester Secondary School sufficiency, which I think is what you're referring to, there was forecast to be first of all, they will meet the schools will meet the sufficiency for September 26, so that's good news. Secondly, it was a forecast in relation to into year 2029. There was a requirement for 4 FE, 120 year groups, and that was the forecast at the last time. The education sufficiency now forecast is for 3 FE, so it's come down by 30 because some developments aren't proceeding. That will be what's announced on February the 5th. And Tudor Grange, which weren't providing any capacity, are now providing a half year group. Along with Bishop Perrone, that is a 1.5 year groups, and there is, as I explained at the previous council and cabinet meetings, there is ample spare capacity at both Pershore High School and the Chase and others. So we're actually well within we were within the sufficiency last time we discussed that. There is no requirement to build a new secondary school. So what I was referring to earlier, which is going to be tremendous news, is in relation to send capacity, huge send capacity. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so you've shared some new information with us there about sufficiency of places, I think, that we'll need to digest at a later point. But Seb, I didn't hear there a commitment to funding for a new school. Would you agree with that, Seb? And yeah, you would agree with that as well, Councillor Foster. Okay, was that okay? Right, okay. I've said okay far too much. I think, Matt, did you have a different point to make around DSG, or has it been covered? Or?
It was a bit, yeah. It's more about getting a better understanding of the rapid increase, because we've had overspend for the past few years, but it's ballooning at the moment. So it's trying to get an understanding of what are the reasons behind it. Is it just that the money that the government giving us is just so far behind what we need that it's just accumulating there, or is it also what we talked about earlier in this meeting about sending EHCPs. If we're getting more coming through that need support, then is that just adding on to DSG? So if you could answer that,
Thanks,
please.
Adam.
Thank you.
I can see you want to answer this one.
All of the above. That's the succinct answer. There's a far more detailed answer, and there are potential efficiencies that can and ought to be made and that we're working on. But broadly, yeah, it's both of the elements that you referenced. An important point, Phil Rook has said it a number of times, and I always get the sense he says it quite quietly, and I'm not about to shout at everyone. We are not going to get the high needs deficit to zero. That's pie in the sky. What Grant Thornton want to see is essentially what we do with regard to mainstream social care placement. So you've just heard from Steph about the children's overspend, which in the main is down to the overspend on children's placements. I can't get that down to zero either because of needs of children. But what I can do very, very clearly, line by line, child by child, is demonstrate that where we can achieve cost avoidance, we are achieving cost avoidance. What Grant Thornton are essentially saying is, we know you've got an approach, we know you've got a plan, but we want that line by line evidential detail. It's a bit more complicated than that, and there is resource implications as well, but it's the same philosophical approach that Grant Thornton expect to see and need to see, and I fully understand that as well, but that will not equate to, come the end of the financial year, 194 million becoming a couple of pound. It will equate to whatever it equates to, and it will continue in that approach, but yeah, it's just a really, really important point to make.
Yeah, thanks for providing the information there. I think we're all still waiting for what we're supposed to do in the interim period between now and 2028, when the statutory override ends and central government supposedly take on, some of this funding pressure, but who knows what we're supposed to do between now and then. So again, we await further information really. But Matt, did that answer your question? That's fabulous. Yeah, thank you. So Dan, I've got you next, which I think is picking up on the statutory recommendation, the Grant Thornton, and then I've got Mel and Sam. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, just on this kind of statutory recommendation that we're meant to be having these regular meetings to look at kind of deficit reduction. Although, to be honest, you've just completely bummed me out, the idea it will never get to zero. I mean, I know it, I just never wanted it to be said aloud. It was one of those things I was happy to have in the back of my head. How are these meetings actually working? And where will we then see these actions from those meetings as councillors, so we can actually see that there is progression? And also, potentially, how will these then be scrutinised as well, so that we can see that there is movement forward and there is the potential to, dare I say it, improve them?
Yeah, I think Dan's referring to the fortnightly meetings that are taking place. Yeah, so thanks, Adam.
So they continue, obviously, to take place. It's representation, it's senior management representation, but operational management representation across the partnership, as near as damn it. There are colleagues in the room. Holly, who sat behind me, is part of that working group. It always helps to have someone with a senior financial head in those meetings as well. Some of the response that I'll give to you sort of relates to some of the comments I made earlier on. So my expectation is that it is scrutinised at Children's Overview and Scrutiny panel, audit and governance as well. Ultimately, it will be heard at council as well, isn't necessarily so. Grant Thornton will be given an update at the end of March. I'm pretty sure that's the timescale that they're working to in terms of their assessment of our high needs deficit management plan, and that's what I was referencing earlier on in terms of they will be they will share that with all and sundry. I've got the same aspiration as you. I'd love for it to be zero for obvious reasons, but hey, I never signed up to be disingenuous. It's never going to happen. And again, and this is the other thing I think that's really important as well, and I think it goes back to Matt's question earlier on, what is this about really? Is it about a sharp increase in terms of EHCP numbers? Is it about inadequate funding from central government? Yeah, it's both of those things. And by virtue of that, it's an issue that's shared with most local authorities across the country. But we have got a particularly high number of EHCPs as well. So in as much as, hey, we're not unique and it's shared with the majority of local authorities, in terms of the actual total number, we do stick out a bit. And that's the reality of it. There's another region, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work it out, another area in our region who is experiencing something similar. And again, you know, I can't give you a scientific answer to it, and I don't need to. But there is something, you've had some of the conversations today, there is something about if the perception is the only way you can achieve a service is by going down a certain route, then that will continue to grow.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks, Adam. So we've got Mel with a question next, and then Sam, I think, and then we'll see where we're at.
The question which I've got is really for the mainstream schools on how you're actually going to equip the children for STEM provisions. You have mentioned that. What is the cost going to be for that, first of all? And second of all, I've also got a question on, you mentioned spend to save plan. What is that plan? And then finally, the transportation, overall costs. Obviously, we just need to have a breakdown further on how are we going to be able to save any further costs.
Thanks, Mel. So just to clarify, the transport cost, do you mean with the sufficiency of places transporting children to other schools that aren't their nearest local secondary school? Okay, I just wanted to get that clear in my head. Okay, Councillor Foster, are you able to provide some answers, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can answer the second one was spend to save. The detail, the only detail I can give on that is obviously our ambitious plan is to build SEND school capacity in a central Worcestershire environment, and that would reduce the cost of transportation of the children. So the cost of home to school transport to far reaches of the county and outside the county, not only saving the transport cost but also the cost of the independent provision, which can be as much as £80,000 a year, which we are currently paying. So that's the spend to save, but as to where that is and when that will be completed, that is commercially sensitive information. Adam, are you happy with questions 1 and 3?
Yeah. I think I'm just trying to think about the best response to your question, really, because it's quite wide-ranging, especially when you think about inclusion in mainstream schools. What does that look like in real terms? What's the breakdown? What's the associated cost? What's the capital budget with regard to that? That information is going to be, because it's the education sufficiency report that is going to be presented to Cabinet, so that will all be encapsulated within that. We know that from a SEND capital perspective, the total figure is 28 million, is what we've been talking about. I know there's been some debate about, oh, that's been slashed and burnt, and that's not the case whatsoever. I would suggest, in the spirit of trying to be helpful, that I think that the Cabinet report, analysis of that Cabinet report, which will be imminently shared anyway, and thereafter questioning it. Yeah.
I think that's acceptable to me. Is that acceptable to you, Mel? So that we await what's in that Cabinet report, and then there's a recommendation if there are outstanding questions that we can seek responses at the next ONS meeting. Is that okay? That's fine with me. Okay. Brilliant, thank you. So Sam, you might have our final question of the morning.
Thank you, Chair. Back to the home to school transportation. I think my concern is that up until this moment, logic hasn't been applied to this insofar as the fact that we have children from the same area going to the same school, and buses haven't been utilised, or minibuses or what have you. So how confident are you that you can procure that kind of service, and it's not just sort of a cut on the face of it, sort of an action that we want to do, but we might not be able to get there? have you already started talking to service providers and you're confident that this cut can be made in cost? And do we know why this logic hasn't been applied prior to now?
Okay, so that's a question looking forwards and backwards. Who would like to answer, or do you want to take it in parts?
Double act, I guess. So, first and foremost, we do reviews all the time. So it's not that we, suddenly decide we're going to review our transport contracts, and that sounds like a good idea. What we've got is an annual programme where we review everything at least once a year. So some of the underspend that you're seeing in this financial year, the 6 million underspend this financial year, is already coming from reviewing of some of our routes and some of our contracts and some of our transport providers. So what we do is we do them in blocks. So we'll do out-of-county SEND, out-of-county home-to-school transport, non-SEND mainstream. We'll then do in-county home-to-school transport, in-county unavailable routes, out-of-county. Do you know what I'm trying to say? There's a number of different categories of provision of transport, transport to PRUs, all of those different types of transport services. And what we do is we review who's in those categories, which children, which schools they're going to, because you can imagine that it's not always the same, because obviously children come in, children go out of school years into school blocks, into middle schools, senior schools, and you get a lot of children who's on SEND plans might have a change in their designated school. So it's a regular process of reviewing, is the right child on the right method of transport at the right time with the right PA or not, as the case may be. So it's constantly changing as a population of children. So what we've done is we've kind of stratified the population into, right, let's have a look at this chunk of the population. So we're about halfway through reviewing everything. Again, if you know what I mean, because we do it annually anyway. So the ones that we have reviewed, we've made significant reductions, and that's why we've got a 6 million underspend in this year forecast. And the rest of them we are going to be doing over the next 6 months. So what you'll see is a part year effect this year of some of them. Some of them we haven't done yet, and some of them we've got towards the end of the review and we've got a full year effect. So it's a constant. So your question is, how confident are we? We've got a lot of transport providers in Worcestershire. We've got a lot of taxi providers in Worcestershire. And what we are able to do is lease vehicles. So rather than purchase them, a driver can drive a small minibus, if they've got the right licence. They can drive a medium minibus, and we have the ability to hire minibuses. What's ultimately got to be the most important thing is, are we meeting the child's needs in that type of provision? So I can't guarantee that every single contract that's reviewed will be delivered in a different way, because some of them shouldn't be delivered in a different way. And I can't guarantee that every single contract that we review is going to be cheaper. But what I can guarantee is that we're reviewing them all with the best intentions of getting price down whilst meeting the needs of the individual child.
So sorry, I was having an aside conversation. All relevant though. Is that helpful, Sam?
Yeah, that's
it was
very
a really
helpful,
comprehensive answer. Thanks.
I've got another question. Is that right?
Okay.
Yeah.
If you can be quick with it, because I've got 2 more questions from the panel, and then Councillor
Fine.
Robinson's got an additional one, and then I want to bring it to a close. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. With the house building targets, how are we projecting the mainstream schools in Bromsgrove's sort of ability to handle the number of children that are likely to move to the area from outside? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think this has been raised before in relation to Bromsgrove, Malvern, and everywhere else the government's making us build houses. So appreciate the latest update. Thanks.
I revert to, please don't think I'm trying to be evasive, I'm actually trying to be helpful. I revert to the Cabinet report that will imminently be available, because that's part of the forecasting in terms of housing developments, therefore the demand from an education perspective. Those figures are changing as well. So there's a real, which is not to suggest incidentally that all of a sudden there is no demand in Bromsgrove. I'm certainly not saying that, but I am suggesting that the figures are changing. And again, that goes back to that annual education sufficiency report.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I'm sure we can wait. The excitement is palpable in the room for that cabinet cabinet report, I think. Okay, so I'm happy to wait. Yeah. So if I can go to Matt, then Anthony, and then that's it from the committee, I'm afraid, today, and we'll go to Josh for the final question. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. My question's a different area. That it's about the secure placements, the 2 secure placements that have come up. Obviously, it says these are quite rare. I haven't had one this year, and I suppose it's just, for me, to some extent, I should probably know more about this, but it's getting a better understanding of when these secure placements are used, how long maybe on average someone stays in a secure placement, because obviously the costs are very high. And I can't imagine, obviously today we're trying to find ways to make savings. I can't imagine there's probably an easy way to make savings on this, but we probably are kind of very much at the whim of the private companies that run these placements, because they know that we desperately will need it. They can charge a fair bit of money. But questions around that? Thank you.
Yeah, good points. You know, we need to act quickly, don't we, in these situations with such, you know, high, well, I suppose very vulnerable young people, high risk young people. But are there viable alternatives? I don't know the answer to that. And I'm sure that the length on stay, I don't know if it can be averaged, Adam, because it's very independent on young people's needs and situations. But have a go.
I will have a go. It's not commonplace. From memory, in the last 5 years, we've had 11 children in welfare secure placements. Welfare secure placement is placement of last resort. A child has to be subject to an associated secure order, legal order, and essentially we only ever go down that route, and it's only ever sanctioned by the court if the child or young person is a significant danger to themselves or a danger to the member of the public, and a danger to the member of the public. What it means, as archaic as it sounds, is imagine a residential facility, but one that's under lock and key with a really, really high ratio of staffing. I'm not an advocate. I don't think most of children's services are advocates, because it's not actually really dealing with the fundamental issues, although sometimes there can be therapeutic intervention that's inbuilt there, and if not, then we will try and source that accordingly. In terms of duration of placement, you're absolutely right. You can't put an exact figure on it. Suffice to say, the day you go to court and you apply for a secure order will be the same day the judge asks the social work team, and what's your plan to get the child out, before they've even walked in there. So the expectation is that a child is in there for the minimum duration, and there's a whole reviewing mechanism independent of us that's undertaken in that regard, and of course we're to and from court as well. So commonly, children in welfare secure placements may well be there for 3, 4, 5 months. It's not so common that you're talking 12 months, 18 months, although there are clearly exceptions. For everyone's interest, because there's a national shortage of welfare secure placements, they cost an absolute fortune. There will always be a need, unfortunately, because even though the demand is small, the demand is there, and there is development underway. It's a very convoluted process, but regional development underway of what's called the Safe Centre. But yeah, I can't stress enough, wherever possible, we manage the risk to avoid children being in that scenario. And I think the other point that's really relevant here, because it's a misnomer, so the welfare secure placement may be costing, say, £18,000 a week. In order to step a child out of the welfare secure placement, sometimes it costs more. And actually, we should, as much as I don't want to pay more, I mean, trust me, I don't want to be the DCS of an overspending service to the tune of £10 million, but I'd rather spend more than £18,000 a week to get a child out of welfare secure and feel relatively confident they're not going to go back there again. That's not always the case, Matt, but sometimes it is.
Yeah, thank you. I think we all understand the complex nature that we're discussing here. I think, Justin, you wanted to add a little bit to this.
It was just picking up Adam's point that we have agreed to support the creation of a regional safe centre, which will help bring the cost down somewhat, but inevitably it's always going to be extremely high. But we have agreed to support that. So.
Thank you. Again, it's the young people, isn't it? The wellness and taking them out of harm's way as soon as we possibly can, but welcome that. Thank you. So I think, Anthony, you have the final panel question, and then Josh has a quick question, I believe.
Thank you. Just go back to Steph's update on the contract reviews. I've heard about the Mobisoft software that we use. Is that just route optimization, or does it actually play any part in the control of pupil and contract data?
Steph, thanks.
Mobisoft is a route optimising software.
Great, a nice quick one to end on. Thank you, Anthony. So I noticed that Councillor Josh Robinson has joined us today. I'm sure that's because he's eagerly wanting to hear the conversation, but also you must have a question, I'm sure.
I do. Thank you, Chair. Just a quick point as a chair of a scrutiny committee. It seems today, and I might be wrong, that you got new information that you weren't aware of. And I always believe in scrutiny gives you the best decisions as a council. So is there a way at Cabinet, because I've had it at my scrutiny, that they could better inform at least chairs about things that are going on in the future, so we can get a better plan of scrutiny for everyone? But that wasn't what I actually asked. Going for. Sorry, did you want
No,
to?
I just wanted to say I do want to make it look like I know what we're talking about and what's in the papers, but sometimes some things are a bit of a surprise. But I don't know if there is a way around that, because I think Councillor Foster has presented some new information today from his perspective as a cabinet member that we might not necessarily see in officers' reports, for example. But I totally take your point. But you do have a question as well as an observation.
Sorry. Just a couple of questions. We hear a bit on foster carers first. I noticed previously you've said that there was a 6-month period where you've got the biggest increase in foster carers. I think you've said that previously, and you linked that to the pay increase that's happened. So that sounds all positive. Is there a data behind that? So the 6 months increase and when the pay increase came into about? And then I have a second question on homeschool transport. But
I think that's for you, Justin.
So I actually started working on it back in June, and what we found was, as I met with foster carers, so the actual increase itself only came in on the 1st of November, but actually the process started way back in June, and I can give you the anecdotal accounts of, as I listened to foster carers and met with them and said, I absolutely get that having had it frozen for 3 years, we need to do something about that. So I can absolutely promise you we will do whatever we can to fix that. Anecdotally, I can tell you that foster carers sat there and said to me, well, I was absolutely thinking of leaving, but I'm prepared to give it a chance. So what happened was, rather than us losing, like we had in the first 6 months of the year, more foster carers than we'd been able to recruit, a lot of those foster carers who would have left stayed. So that's all contributed. So it's actually a total of a net increase of 9 foster carers that we've had, which doesn't sound a lot, but when you're starting at 88, 9 extras a big difference. So it actually started before the increment came in.
Thanks.
Does that answer the...
That was going to be my next question. Does that answer your question, Josh? And perhaps a recommendation from us is that we get further detail, written down in a presented way of that situation that Josh has just...
One extra bit on that, just a bit of good news that I had last week. We've currently got, I think, 21 in assessment. So if you think, if all of those come to approval, we could be looking at some really nice increases over the next few months, serious increases. So, I'll absolutely keep you updated. Perhaps next panel, I can give you the absolute up-to-date where we are at that point.
That's good news, and I'm sure that we'll fit in an update as soon as we can in the programme of what we've got ahead of us. But thanks, Justin. Josh, did you say I had another question?
Yeah, just to say that sort of half answer, because it'd be good to get the data from it, because at the moment it sounds anecdotal. It's good news, but I'd just love to see the data behind it before I give it a full thumbs up. Just on homeschool transport, I mentioned it obviously at Environment Scrutiny Committee, and I know you're looking at it in May, isn't it? So I don't want to preempt your work. But the one thing that didn't get through was on unavailable routes, and my belief is that's just going to be absorbed into the budget now, that saving. Just I asked it environment, just so it can have all those unavailable routes and a sort of idea where you're starting to look on those, and obviously there's loads that you won't be able to do, so just have the few that you are able to do.
Okay, so now you're presenting me as with the new information that you've received in your scrutiny meeting, but is it possible to have the detail that Josh has requested around routes?
I think it was agreed at the panel, Josh, wasn't it, that you would get that information. So may I suggest that it goes to both panels? So Sam, when we get the information relevant to the environment panel, if Chair, you're happy, gets the same information circulated to your panel.
Sounds good to me. Good to have the same information going to two panels, I think, because it is one of those areas that cuts across both of our committee areas, really. Okay, thank you, everybody. I think, again, we've had a really sensible discussion around the pressures that we're facing, with some really honest discussions. I'd like to just do a final thank you to Public Health, actually, because I noted in the report that they've provided funding to help us tackle health inequalities. Also, this is new information now, although some of you may have had the email. Lisa sent around an email that they have revamped their Worcestershire Insights web resource, which includes a lot of helpful information, including local area data, community initiatives funded by Public Health, future population projections, and family hub profiles. So that's something that's particularly pertinent to us as a committee, I think. And so I just wanted to formally thank Public Health for making a financial contribution to our sort of service area, and maybe make a recommendation that a link to that resource that Lisa sent around to us is included in the minutes and circulated more generally to councillors, so that they've got that information at their fingertips, really. So I hope you'd all agree with those 2 points that I've just made. Yep. Fab. So I think now I'm supposed to sum up discussions that we've had. Now, one of the things that I struggle with is actually retaining verbal information. So this is really quite hard for me. So I think I'm going to rely on Sam, who's been making some notes to sum up the discussion that we've had. I hope that's all right, Sam.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll do it in no particular order, so they might not be grouped together. So I think we started off with the acknowledgement of the decisions of council, that the charging for parking at Worcester Woods was withdrawn, and the home to school transport unavailable routes was not agreed. There was reference to the Vale Lodge being paused and looking for alternatives. And then we moved on to concerns which were expressed around the DSG, high needs deficit and the rate of increase, and that the management plan is being scrutinised by the auditors, and the suggestion was that that would be added to our work programme so that we could have a look at it as well. I think the panel was pleased to note the 6 million underspend in home to school transport this year, and reassurance was provided that there would be no reduction in service delivery. I made a note that in October 2 children were placed in welfare secured placements, and at the end of November was £18,391 per week, which would cost 1.9 million in a full year. Panel would be pleased to note that the schools will meet sufficiency for September 26 and the commitment to strengthen SEND capacity in the county. So have we got any others you'd like to add, members?
I think that's a really accurate summary, and thank you so much for keeping a note of those, Sam, because I do kind of struggle with that. What about any further recommendations, or does that cover that as well? Or I
can just say this is just for budget comments to OSPB, so I have noted the public health recommendation, but this was purely for the budget ones.
Okay, does anyone have specific recommendations for OSPB around budget? I only really noted that obviously we're awaiting further information from government about SEND white paper. So obviously we'll need to make a recommendation that we react to the information that is included in that white paper, and also information about how we're supposed to meet the funding gap between now and 2028 in terms of high needs deficit, DSG, etc. apart from that, I didn't pick up any other major recommendations for OSPB, but please correct me if I'm wrong. No? Okay, brilliant. So I think we're done with agenda item 6, so we're just going to move on to discuss item 7, which is the work programme. So if you want to leave, those of you that have already contributed so fully, you are more than welcome to, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So if we can have a look at the work plan, everybody else, and agree whether we want to make any amendments to what's already quite a full programme of scheduled things to discuss, agenda items, but also ideas that we want to include. Can I just start, Sam, just before I bring you in, just to make a quick update about the suggestions raised at OSPB on the 6th of January, which included children's residential care, that I'm pretty sure we have got to discuss somewhere on the agenda, but we will just double check that. Also, the bus service improvement plan in relation to homeschool transport. So we've certainly got homeschool transport on the agenda, but I'm not sure whether we did that cross-referencing of the, because it's quite new news that BSIP is now being used to kind of, to bridge that funding gap. And the vacant seat scheme was also suggested at OSPB. So, yeah. So, sorry, Sam, was there anything else you wanted to add?
I was just wondering if we could bring fostering forward at some point.
I'm pretty sure it's in the plan. It might be the very last point. Is it the very last point that was added? No?
Yeah. Update on developments in relation to
Yeah.
Is it to be...
So certainly we need to schedule it in somewhere. I'm just conscious that the next 2 meetings are pretty heavy
Full.
in terms of agenda, but we will certainly have that conversation because as we've been hearing today from Councillor Bowen, you know, there's new information coming forward all of the time in relation to foster care by the sounds of it. So yeah, good point. Anybody else?
Well, obviously, we're going to have the sufficiency report at Cabinet, so it's how we need to probably scrutinise that. So do we need to do it immediately? You know, it's hot off the press type thing. Ideally, you do it straight away, but then, as you say, we've got a lot on in the March meeting.
We're up against it time-wise. I don't know what the most appropriate thing would be in terms of would it be pre-Cabinet scrutiny or haven't we got time for that? I don't know. Dan, you look like you've got an answer.
Just on the sufficiency one, I think we do need to look at it as quick as possible because there were some errors that I've highlighted repeatedly about the Pershore stuff, especially with the new development. If we don't get in there, we need to, because I think what's happened is it's a housing issue, and I think there's a disconnect between Wychavon and the county. So if we don't actually get that sorted, we could be in a situation where we're planning with something where the numbers are wrong.
Sam, what do you recommend about school sufficiency and how we take that forward and raise any concerns that we've got?
Well, you don't have a meeting that's scheduled that you could... So next meeting is the 20th of March and Cabinet is the 5th of Feb, so I suggest we have a chat about it offline.
Okay, we'll do that and we'll send something round.
Can I just add my 2 pence to that? Obviously, the Cabinet report will be provided sometime before that Cabinet with the sufficiency within it. Can we make sure that we have oversight of that as soon as it's published within the Cabinet papers and potentially put an extraordinary meeting in? I just think end of March or March time is a bit too long. I think wheels would have already gone in motion. Not that I'm advocating for more meetings, but there's probably one that is quite important.
Let's see what we can do with that. I agree. It's a supremely important issue that we need to correct any inaccuracies that we think might be there, and also look at the impact on our young people. So we'll see what we can do. Okay. Anything else at this point? No. Brilliant. So that brings us to the end of another very full meeting, and your participation is valued. Thank you very much. The date of the next meeting is probably, unless we squeeze another one in, Friday the 20th of March at 10 o'clock, and as far as I'm aware, it's here again in Wychavon. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.